Serious, people who have slept with their boss for a promotion raise, was it worth it? I slept with a camp director and she gave me a good job as a camp counselor. I had a higher salary than all the other counselors. Would do it again in a second. When I was 18 I was part-time running food at a really high-end Italian restaurant. After shifts ended everyone went to the bar next door and got s-faced every night. One of the managers was a 24-year-old blonde that I really had a thing for. After a night at the bar we were loaded and she said I could crash at her place. So I went and one thing led to another. We fricked and I took a cab home. The next weekend when I had shifts the managers called me in because they fired the bartender and because I'm very hard working that I'm going to fill his position. Maybe not an office promotion story but I was making a couple hundred more a night bartending than bussing. TLDR. I banged a manager and started making more at my part-time job. I was the boss sleeping with my employee. She was a very mediocre employee to begin with. Raging alcoholic. Would come to work looking like heck with black eyes and wet hair. Never on time. After we started sleeping together I think she developed the attitude that she had to start performing better at work or it would be obvious there was something going on when she didn't get fired. Within a few weeks she's a model employee, probably far better than even I was. She received several small lateral promotions within a few months. One I was involved in and one I was not. We ended up dating for over a year while I was still her boss before we both left the business. We both started looking for other employment because of our relationship and found better jobs with better pay. A few years later we are still together and now living together and engaged. I slept with my boss. We were all out having drinks and were sharing a cab. She told the driver to just drop both of us off at her place and I gladly went with it. I transferred to another department shortly thereafter because we both agreed it was weird now. Unbeknownst to me, I was giving a raise and a new title when I transferred. I always thought of it as a reward for being discreet. I had sex with her because she was a hot older woman. The raise I got later was unexpected. It seems to me like the men that sleep with their bosses have far more positive experiences than the women. I slept with my boss and ended up quitting the job before she could give me any sort of promotion, mostly because we were moving towards having a relationship and I didn't want that power dynamic to muddy it. Pretty awesome. She sat on my face, and I got $3 more an hour to lifeguard the local pool. Best summer job I ever had. Every lifeguarding job I've ever worked, everyone was sleeping with everyone else, bosses included. Lifeguards are just pretty as frick. When I was in high school I worked at a pretty large movie theater in my area. It was a lot like a restaurant in the sense that everyone is fricking everyone and partying most nights together. We had a very cute manager who was probably about 30ish and pretty strict on most of the guys who worked there, mainly because we were little high school crap heads that thought we were the cat's pajamas. Anyway, I hooked up with her after a party and it was great. We became FWBs and since she was in charge of the time clock she would often clock me in a couple hours early on slow days before I showed up, so I was getting paid full-time 40-hour weeks while only working about 20 hours. She would also have me stay late to clean up after late shows and we would frick in the regional manager's office since it was the only one without cameras, and because the regional manager was a fear-mongering bee. Good story. Sounds like win-win to me. I slept with my boss at the time, and we secretly hid our relationship for several months. In the end, he told his superiors that we were together and it was he that ended up getting the promotion and raise. He was taken away from being my direct supervisor, so our relationship could be out in the open. We were married 4 years later. To sum up this thread, guys, sleep with your female bosses, get raises, or don't. You got laid, who cares? No problems. Girls, marry your boss or change jobs. Sometimes both. Thanks. Now I can read a different Reddit post. Not even kidding. When I was just 18 I had just come out of high school, and I desperately needed a job. I was able to get a job that pays $12 an hour at some guy's small business. The catch is I had to sleep with him. That money was great, but it was really awkward whenever I saw him. I needed the money though, so I would do it again. Boss here in education. I slept with one of my workers. Eventually it moved to a serious relationship and I helped him get a job at his dream engineering firm. Now we're planning on getting married. No regrets. Best decision of my life. I slept with my boss. Granted, we had to file a form to claim we were in a close personal relationship first. He tried to help me get hired elsewhere so it wouldn't be such a conflict. Then he explained what being in that job for 20 years was like, the politics of it all, how everyone hates it after a few years and burns out. So I quit the job and now I'm going for a law degree. Still with him over a year later and couldn't be any happier if I tried. And I think he feels the same. Best decision of my life. I can't even fathom my life without him. He was worth all the stigma and hours changes and pay lost for taking time off to be with him. Not a boss but one of my professors at my university. She was in her late 30s 40 and I was 21-22. It was her first year at the school and was having a rough time meeting people. She was having car troubles so I offered to help her out while I was visiting during her office hours. She offered to feed me dinner, and I was more than happy. We started drinking and ended up in bed. We had a casual relationship for most of the year until I unfortunately had to move after graduating. When finals came around, she told me not to worry about the final 15-page research paper. Heck yeah. But to be completely fair, I was a really good student with a solid A in her class before we started hooking up. As a fellow good student, I love this story the most. Kinda relevant. I had an FWB who was the manager at a store that opened in our town, and I think that had something to do with me getting hired. No experience whatsoever. It was generally a nice experience. I got a ton of special treatment and a couple free lunches. It also didn't hurt that he was in the closet, and I'm sure he appreciated my discretion. I had an FWB. Off topic. But I always get a kick out of how you can tell if someone reads an acronym as the letters or the actual words like this. If OP thought of FWB as friends with benefits, he'd have said a FWB instead of an FWB because the acronym reads like FWB. I had sex with my manager so I could become a full-time waitress. When I started working at my current job I was a hostess. Eventually I was able to wait tables part-time but still, most of my hours were for shifts as a hostess, which only paid minimum wage. I kept pestering the GM and LAMs to be made a full-time waitress but there just weren't enough shifts at the time. Eventually my GM announced that he would be leaving to open another restaurant in another state, not part of our small chain. Completely different franchise. He ended up taking me aside to tell me that he really wanted to make sure I was promoted to full-time server before he left. I was thrilled. He asked if I'd like to talk about it with him at his house that night. I said absolutely. When I got to his place I realized right away that there was a total quid pro quo type of thing in the works. Yes, he'd make sure I officially became a full-time waitress. He promised that while stroking my thigh, though, and that's when I realized what was happening. Yes, I did it. Keep in mind I never felt threatened or pressured. I wanted the promotion, he wanted sex, and I was okay with that. Did it make me feel a little dirty? Definitely, but it was actually a really fun night that I don't regret. Was it worth it? Absolutely. At the time I was barely able to pay my bills. I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. In the 2+ years since I've managed to save a pretty decent amount of money. When it's not killing me I like the work, too. But if I'd had to wait for that promotion, especially after that GM left, it would have probably been months before I became a full-time waitress. There's no way I would have been able to manage that and I'd have probably ended up getting a different job. So yeah, I was happy with the results. Slept with my boss. She wasn't hot but cute and I had never been with a curvy girl before. We left a company awards ceremony and had a long drive back to our branch too. 1/2 HRS. Well, long story short, she ended up giving me roadhead and we pulled over to Frick. It was fun and we continued our relationship for about 6 months. It ended when she was promoted to regional manager because she was always traveling to different branches. Never got a raise nor a new position. I got to brag to my buddies though. You could have been promoted to assistant to the regional manager, at least. Slept with my boss when I was 17 and she was 24. No forethought to promotion or a raise, but just because she was an older woman, sexy and I was crap with women at the time. It was all good in the end. Happened a couple of times. I got privileges like the hours I wanted at work and in the sections I wanted, as well as a side benefit. Left the job when I went to university and all was good. I would do it again most likely, but not for promotion or advancement, but just because it was good fun. Have slept with a co-worker a couple of times. I would say that was more problematic than with my boss. I must admit there are bosses I've had that I would have liked to have slept with. Not for promotion or a raise, but because there is something very attractive about a woman in power. She wasn't all that bad looking. I didn't get a raise, but it got her so far off my back because she was afraid of the consequences. She hated me before. She was terrified of me after the fact. It was beautiful. I didn't do anything for the rest of the summer. Also, it helped that I was 17 and she 32. Yeah, when I was young, she was a sub from the downtown branch. Introduced me to some terrible music. Treated me so well in bed. I guess I had it easy after that. But we served ice cream. It was already super basic. This reads like modern Raymond Chandler. When I was 16, I worked at MC Donald's. I ended up secretly dating 2IC and got pay raises, more breaks, and could choose my hours rolls, which was pretty sweet. Wasn't intentional though. Not my boss, but I'm sleeping with my boss's daughter. My boss knows about us and has yet to say anything or treat either of us differently. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I'm a very good and loyal employee there, so I think he knows it'd be a bad business decision to fire me based off of an emotional standpoint, rather than a rational one. I think the only real consequence I've experienced would be that there have been times where I've been over for dinner and my boss has said, "Oh, I'm adding you on the schedule for tomorrow at 6 AM as we're leaving." It's usually on a Friday or Saturday night when he knows her and I are probably going straight from dinner with her parents to the bar, or out to a club with some of our other co-workers. Just as a little frick you because he knows he can't fire me simply on the basis of dating his daughter, who just so happens to work there as well. We've been dating for 3 months now and I know they tell you to never crap where you eat, but I would do it all over again. If anything, I feel like it's brought me closer to my boss. He's a totally different guy at home. Funny and just a simple guy who watches football every Sunday. Not that I don't like him at the job. He's respectful and the type of person who's a leader, not just a boss. I'm not sure if it actually is helping, but it feels like he's getting exposed to the real me, not just the work me. Seeing what kind of person I am all the time. So I'm gonna keep on dating his daughter because she's hot as crap and I like her. I do some freelance work as a reporter and actually just agreed to a sexual relationship with an editor of a local newspaper I really want to write for. He's 27 years my senior, but the taboo-ness of it is enticing and exciting. And the obvious advantages work-wise that come with it won't be too shabby either. Kinda feel just a little bit guilty about it, but hey, he's like a George Clooney in the town I live in, so why not? I slept with him because I had been attracted to him for years. I continued to advance despite our forbidden encounters based on my quality of work, not having slept with him. My dad is the boss of a mid-sized company. No, this isn't an incest story, and he hired this girl a couple of years back who was quite young and attractive, and seemingly thought she could use her sex appeal to get a promotion. She started coming onto him, and he made it really clear he wasn't interested. He was very happily married and she was 36 years his junior. He thought it was weird and creepy. The girl wouldn't take no for an answer. It started off as really outright flirting, looking for excuses to touch him, wearing inappropriate outfits to work. The office has a strict dress code for employees and she was definitely breaking it. One day showing up in a very transparent men's white shirt with no pants and nothing underneath. One day wearing a sexy Halloween costume on a day that wasn't anywhere near Halloween. And other such behaviors that, whilst annoying and weird, were harmless. Then she started to send him really explicit emails and pictures of herself, groping him as he walked past her, trying to kiss him, etc. He ended up firing her on the grounds of sexual harassment. A few weeks later there was an office party and she showed up and somehow got him alone, climbed on his lap and told him she'd do anything to get her job back. and started to unbutton his pants. He pushed her away, told her he wasn't interested and if she tried anything like this again he'd call the police. She told him that she was never interested in an old prick like him anyway, that the only reason she had tried to seduce him was to get a promotion, and that any guy would be lucky to have me. You must be a total F to turn this down. A few weeks later a similar thing happened. She showed up at an event she wasn't invited to and tried to have her way with him in order to regain her job. He called the police. They charged her with sexual assault, and she got off on community service but would be registered as a sex offender. Then it got really scary. She started showing up at our house, threatening my family, saying my dad had ruined her life and that she was going to make him pay. One day we came home to find her naked in my parents' bed. On another she showed up at my school claiming she was my mother and needed to take me to an appointment. Luckily the receptionist knew my mother and told her to leave, wouldn't let her get anywhere near me. We called the police again and they took her into custody, and then to a hospital where she is now receiving mental treatment. Moral of the story: don't try to frick your boss if they're not interested. Seriously, it's not going to end well for anyone. My mother slept with her boss, married him, started her own company and is now a millionaire. True story. Think it was worth it for her. You're the fortunate one. Millionaire family and you didn't have to frick your dad. Well, I slept with one of my bosses when I was in high school working at Wendy's, but it was just because she was hot and gave me vodka. She made the schedule so we always closed together. Best nights ever. I will freely admit that I slept with my supervisor from work. We spent a lot of time working together and in my career, which involves about 50% field work, it's hard to meet guys from outside the job. So I met this great guy who was extremely interesting, had hobbies he was passionate about, and he just happened to be the person I report to. One night he asked me if I wanted to go rock climbing with him and so that became our thing a few nights a week. A few weeks later I absolutely starving but was too tired to cook dinner, so as a joke I asked what he was going to make me that evening and he took me up on the offer and cooked some amazing food. And then afterwards he showed me an amazing night, then an amazing week, then amazing months. We split up because I had to move away with work, so I didn't get a promotion or a raise, but I was kept on for the entire duration of the project as one of 3 geologists from an original 12. I don't think it was because I was sleeping with him, not my boss, just a supervisor, because my productivity rates were higher than anyone else's. The advantage I got from sleeping with him is that when I was out of work, he was asking around all his contacts to try and find me something. It's nice to have someone helping me out occasionally. Was doing a work experience program back in high school when I was about 17, working at a golf course owned by a cute Asian lady. She spoke perfect English, was in her early 30s and owned the entire golf course, including also homes that were built around it. For the remainder of the program, I was basically paid to clean up the golf course every once in a while, take her awesome Hummer out to get it cleaned, pick up coffee, donuts, whatever, then come back and bone her for the remainder of the day. She lived in a suite above the public lodge. I still work there in the summers and enjoy most of the same benefits. I am 25. If this is true, this is a dream. If this is a dream, it's still a dream. Late to the party on this one, but I definitely think it was worth it. Fresh out of college, my boss was only a few years older than I was. She promoted me before anything happened so that we would be working in closer proximity and would be attending work functions and conferences together. The subsequent year and a half before she moved on to a different opportunity was possibly the best of my working career, and this was almost 10 years ago. We were both unmarried, not necessarily always single, but no one got hurt until the end. She developed feelings and needed to move on. Up until then it was unreal. Sex on the desk while working late. Fancy hotel rooms in nice cities for conferences. Hand jobs on the plane under the blanket. You know, true love. Kinda the other way around. I slept with one of the girls that worked for me. I was in a relationship at the time and this gorgeous, smart, funny girl started working for me. We really hit it off as friends and we started messaging each other, initially work related. Our messages became more personal and we began to really connect as friends. Then one night my colleague was out with her friend for dinner and invited me along for drinks. We headed to this nightclub and began to drink vodka by the bottle. Big mistake. and ended up confessing our feelings to each other. We left the club together and knew what we were doing was wrong, so decided to go separate ways home. By the time I got home I had a missed call. I called her back and we met in the city where we sat and talked until the early hours. She invited me to go back to hers as temperatures had really dropped. I said yes and we made our way there holding hands and talking. When I got to hers we lay next to each other on the sofa and talked all night. Nothing happened. The next morning was awkward and I went back to mine feeling very confused. A couple of days later we were at a work night out and the pattern repeated as we went back to hers and talked all night. The next morning she kissed me. We slept together. And again. And again. I felt like crap for what I had done, but I couldn't help but feel happy at the same time. I broke it off with my girlfriend, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I now realize that I am completely in love with this girl and we are currently looking for a place to live together. Work got pretty awkward as people realized what had happened and my now girlfriend left for another venture. TL. Doctor got late, fell in love, work was still awkward. I was like, oh well that's nice, until you got to the part about already having a girlfriend. It was a crappy job. We both worked at Starbucks, she was my supervisor. I transferred and now we are engaged and both in nursing school. Worth it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.